Hello and welcome. From the darkest corners of Reddit, we bring you true stories that will make your blood run cold. These are stories of events that ordinary people have experienced, but never forgotten. Are you ready to go deeper into the horror? Turn off the lights, relax, and watch as fear slowly envelops you. Before I get into my story, I want to make it perfectly clear that I am an avid camper. I've been out in the woods practically my entire life. I would spend hours climbing in trees and running around the woods for hours when I was a kid. My childhood home was in the middle of the woods. I felt comfortable in the woods. They gave me a sense of safety. But what happened during my recent and last camping trip changed all of that. I was planning this trip for months with my friends. I had planned to camp for 4 days at a local hiking trail near my apartment. I had planned how much food and water I was going to take. I brought my fishing rod, as there was a creek nearby. Mind you, I've never been to this hiking trail before. I've only heard about it from some recent friends of mine I made while here for college. They claim to have camped here multiple times before. We had planned to hike for about 5 miles up the trail and set up camp a mile off trail. These friends had claimed this was their normal camping spot. The day I went to the trail, I was excited for it. I didn't listen to anything my professor was teaching, nor did I write down any notes. All I was focused on was my weekend of camping and how much fun it would be. I was relieved when we were dismissed from class. I instantly went back to my apartment and packed everything I needed for the trip. When I was ready to drive to the trail, it took around 30 minutes till I got there. When I arrived, it was just a small gravel parking lot with a run-down sign that said the name of the trail with a picture of a fox on it. I saw my 2 friends sitting at a nearby table with all the supplies sitting around, talking, while looking at a map. "Hey, are you guys ready?" I asked. They both greeted me and told me the plan for the weekend and pointed on the map where our camping spot was. It didn't look too far on out. I figured we would get there in around 2 hours. When we first stepped foot in the woods, I couldn't help but notice how quiet it was. No chirping of birds, no rushing of water, or even any insects making noise. It all felt too eerie, but I just told myself it was just my imagination. We were walking for what seemed like hours, and I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched the entire time. Though no matter how many times I looked around, I saw nothing. I saw no birds or animals anywhere. These woods felt too empty to me. When we made it to our camping spot, we discussed who would have the duty of setting up the camp while the other 2 would go look for firewood. I was stuck with setting up the tent. I didn't mind though. I've set up tents by myself multiple times before. But that feeling of being watched just kept getting worse. It felt like I was looking up every 3 minutes. But again, I saw nothing staring back at me. As I was halfway through with setting up the tent, I heard the snapping of sticks coming from across the river that's only about 10 yards from our tent. I looked up quickly and saw nothing, so I figured it was just a deer or something. But I heard it again, this time louder, and it sounded too heavy to be a deer. So I quickly looked up and saw what I thought was a head staring back at me, 7 feet above the ground, with dark eyes staring at me. I was staring at this for what seemed like minutes, until my 2 friends returned, and asked what I was staring at. I pointed to across the river, and whatever I saw was gone. They had concerned looks on their faces, and jokingly asked if the woods were getting to me. I just assumed I was tired from setting up the tent, and sat on the ground while they set up the fire pit. Night eventually came, and fortunately, we had a fire by then. We sat by the fire and talked about life, how classes are going, and what our best camping experiences were. We started telling each other tragic things that happened to us, trying to scare each other. Suddenly, one of us, David, said, "My younger brother went missing in these woods 9 years ago. I asked him why he would ever want to come back here, and he told me that he couldn't help it, that something keeps telling him to come back to these woods. He claims that he feels something watching him in these woods, and just assumes it's his brother watching over him, offering him protection. I just accepted this as truth, as I didn't want to think of what was actually watching us in these woods. We eventually grew tired, and 2 of us went to sleep. The other one, Mike, stayed awake and watched the fire for a little longer. Me and David both climbed into our sleeping bags and talked a little more before going to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night, though, to something outside the tent. It sounded like something hitting a tree only 50 feet from us. I looked over to the other 2 and saw them both still asleep. I waited it out, thinking it was a woodpecker or something, but it happened again, and I knew that it wasn't a bird, but something smacking the side of a tree outside our tent. I was too scared to even see what it could possibly be. I quickly shut my eyes, hoping that whatever it was would just walk away and leave us alone. I got that wish, thankfully, and woke up in the morning to both David and Mike outside the tent getting ready for the day. All 3 of us were planning on going fishing for the day. I was really excited for this, as I've always been an avid fisher. I excitedly got ready for the day and got my fishing pole. We headed down the trail to a bank in the river, probably half a mile from our tent, and fished for around 30 minutes until we started to hear rocks being thrown. David shrugged this off as fish just jumping out of the water, but I knew better than that. One of the rocks came dangerously close to hitting me, and I looked to wherever it came from, and I saw the same thing from yesterday, looking at me, except much closer than before. This time I can see its expression. It was angry. I saw that it had fur all around its body. I've heard stories of Bigfoot, but I never for once actually believed anything about it. But now I was staring at something that could legitimately be a Bigfoot. My friends saw me staring at something, and they looked at where I was staring. They saw the same thing, but had a different reaction than me. They thought it was a bear, and started making loud noises at it to try and scare it off. Eventually it did go away, but not because it was scared. It slowly away from us, keeping eye contact with us. We eventually got done with fishing, and made our way back to our tent. But our tent and fireplace was tampered with. The tent was on its side, and the coals and remaining firewood were scattered everywhere. All 3 of us were concerned with whatever would do this. We weren't even that far from our tent, and we didn't hear anything do this. We quickly cleaned up our campsite and looked around, seeing if there's any sign of what did this. We gave up our little search and got ready to make another fire. I was tasked with starting a fire, while David and Mike went to go look for more firewood. While I was in the middle of starting our fire, I heard it again. 2 knocks against a tree, this time behind me. I quickly turned around but didn't see anything. I slowly turned back and continued with the fire until I heard it again, this time more aggressive. I looked back again, and still I heard nothing. I continued making the fire and actually got it started, but as soon as it started, I heard a slight growl coming from behind me. It made me jump up and look behind. I was too scared to move, but I kept looking for whatever it was, until David tapped me on my shoulder with firewood in the other hand. Mike wasn't with him, though. Asking where he was, David said they both split up to cover more ground, and that he should be back soon. Nightfall eventually came, and Mike still wasn't back. We were about to come looking for him when we heard something running towards us. We quickly got up and readied ourselves for whatever animal it was, but it turned out to be Mike, who looked like he's been through hell. We asked where he was, and he said he got lost and started rambling on about what happened to him. He said he got ran off of the trail by some animal growling at him, and that he had to find another way back. We were relieved to know he was safe, and was just about to sit back down until we heard this blood-curdling roar coming from somewhere close in the woods. We all turned to look at each other, all with a scared look on our face. We had no idea what to do at all. We heard something big crash right by us. I looked and saw a big rock was thrown at us. Whatever is out there wants us out of here. We started hearing footsteps approaching from all around us, and we realized we needed to get out of there. We left everything behind, only caring about getting out of there. As soon as we started running, we heard all sorts of roars coming from behind us. We ran and ran and ran to our cars. David tripped on a root sticking out of the ground, and we had to help him back up. All the while, the roars kept getting closer, and footsteps getting louder. We kept running until we made it to our cars. All of this could have been terrible enough for me to never go camping again, but what happened next was the worst part. Right before we got to the parking lot, we heard a tree falling down right in front of us. A big tree fell right in our was, and we had to climb over it. I was first over it, then Mike, then it was David's turn. As soon as he was halfway over it, something grabbed him from behind and dragged him away, his screams getting more and more distant as we had no way of saving him. We both knew we were dead if we went back for him, so we continued to our cars. I fidgeted with my car keys, trying desperately to get them. In the keyhole, while the roars kept getting even louder to the point they were deafening, I eventually got my car unlocked and started, and Mike was already gone at this point. As soon as I started to pull out of the parking lot, a rock flew through my windshield, shattering it. I didn't care. I just wanted out of there and back to the safety of my apartment. I drove fast, not caring about being pulled over because a police officer would still be able to defend me from whatever is out there. I eventually made it back to my apartment. I was unable to sleep, though, still thinking about David, and how we couldn't do anything to save him. His screams haunting me to this day. I planned on going back the next day for my stuff. The following day, I drove back to the trail, everything how it was the day before. The tree still fallen, and I found one of David's shoes near the tree. I made it to our campsite, and what I saw horrified me. As I was walking up to our campsite, I kept smelling this awful putrid smell that I couldn't tell what it could be. When I made it to our campsite, I knew what it was. There, laying in the middle of our campsite, was the remains of David, his body mutilated to the point it was almost unrecognizable, his insides almost non-existent. The smell alone was enough for me to hurry up with my equipment, but the body was it for me. I quickly called 911, and an ambulance came and picked up David's body. The police asked me questions about if knew David and what happened to him. I explained everything that happened to him, but he had a look as if he didn't believe me at all. He told me he would be in contact with me if anything comes up. I quickly took my equipment and got out of there as quick as possible. I never returned afterwards, nor have I ever stepped foot in the woods ever again. I don't talk to Mike too much after that. I heard he got heavy into drugs and alcohol shortly after what happened to us. I don't blame him, honestly. I wish I could forget the image of David's scared face as he was dragged off by the creature that got a hold of him. Every night for a month I was plagued by nightmares of David screaming, begging me for help, from whatever it is that has him. Every time I woke up in a sweat, heart almost beating out of my chest. I went to therapy, talked about to my family even, but no one believes me. But I always tell everyone, do not go to Fox Woods trails. That's the story. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and comment for more, and most importantly, subscribe to my channel.